Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate you coming to our meeting about opportunity collaboratives. I'm Noelle Kisher-Lepper. I'm the Director of Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development for the city. And this is an economic development initiative of the city. It's a little different from a lot of the things we normally do, where we're looking at how to grow businesses and how we attract businesses to the community. This is from our talking about, what else matters in growing our business environment, and it's growing our people, upskilling our people, putting our people on a path to prosperity so that they can have a career path and have all of the wraparound services that they need to be successful to stay on that career path and grow their opportunities. So we engaged this team, Mike Higbee and Shelley Moore from OBE Advisors and Insight Strategic Partners, and I'll have them introduce themselves, but we're really excited to be working with them on this project, and we appreciate you all coming today to help us. Who am I turning over to? Mike? Okay, Mike.
So,
thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Can I interrupt you just one
Sure,
second?
please.
I didn't do the housekeeping stuff.
Okay.
Sign up sheet near the door. If you didn't sign in, please do that before you leave. Snacks and some water over there, and restrooms are straight back on the right side of the elevator on the right wall. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. My name is Mike Higbee. I'm with OBE Advisors, LLC. I've actually had some history in Waukegan. For those of you that have been kind of following the lakefront, I was on the original Urban Land Institute panel that looked at the lakefront, part of the SOM team. Still think there's great potential there, but obviously things do not happen overnight. So still a lot of work to do there, but huge potential. So it's always good to come back and look at that lakefront and be part of the downtown and be part of this community. Shelley Moore will introduce herself in a little bit, and she's my partner. We're partnering on this opportunity collaborative program that the city of Waukegan has been very supportive of, asked us to come into town and really look at the community and the major change it's gone through over the last 20, 25 years in population, and some of the economics of the community where there may be some economic distress, and are there ways to organize the community and the service providers in a manner that we can have even greater impact on turning some of that economic distress around and getting positive results. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to try to follow. Shelley knows I don't always follow the slide deck as well as I need to, but in many ways we're asking a very basic question. So as we did a study, and we'll look at the study and just some of the data in just a little bit, but minimum about 20,000 people that live in poverty in Waukegan today, at minimum. That number is probably greater. We think there are about 15,000 households that are experiencing some level of economic distress. And that can be because of lower incomes, it can be size of the family, it can be housing issues that they're confronted with, a number of things that really led to the economic distress. And those are, that's a significant part of the population, and serving that population well and getting the kinds of outcomes that you'd like to see, very difficult task in any community. And clearly that's a challenge here in Waukegan. But one of the questions we like to ask right off the bat, what does success look like for the typical household in Waukegan? And just to kind of get warmed up and to get some interaction going, anybody want to try to answer that question, or a few of you that might want to try to answer that? What does success look like here in Waukegan for a family?
Stability.
I'm sorry?
Stability, stable income.
Stable incomes, economic stability. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You almost raised your hand.
I was waving.
We were waving at each other.
I know, I saw that, but I decided to pick on him anyway. Yeah.
I think that, access to essential resources is critical. I think that more and more families are struggling and deciding between food and housing, and so, having accessible housing is critical.
Yep.
And safe neighborhoods.
Okay. Yep.
Mike, can I ask you to repeat what people are saying because we're live streaming. And I
Okay,
want to make sure
thank
our
you.
audience can-
Yeah, you may get me trained by the end of this whole episode.
And if your mic keeps dropping out, I'll ask you to go in that direction. So you're
Okay,
closer to the-
very good. I'll start heading that way right now. So what was mentioned, economic stability, clearly some of the basic essential elements that kind of lead to that. It could be housing, could be food, could be income. We've heard the statement from, we've been here for about 4 months interviewing a lot of providers and a lot of the not-for-profits that work with folks that might be experiencing economic distress. And they said, there's a lot of households that are kind of in survivor mode. How do we just survive and get day to day, week to week, month to month? Does that sound up to all of you? Anybody else want to take a shot at this question?
Access to nutrition.
Food and access to nutrition? Is that a significant issue here in Waukegan? Okay. Yes, sir.
Access to early childhood education and education in general.
Yep. As you'll see, one of the measures we use is education attainment. And Waukegan, in part because of the population shift, the very dynamic population and the demographics here, well below the state norm and the national norm for education attainment. That, in some cases, we have census tracts that have less than 30% of their population that go on to, working age population that go on to some type of post-secondary education, where the norm in the state is somewhere around 66, 68%. So that's a big disparity. And when you're looking for good paying jobs and trying to get that economic stability, that education or training can make a big difference. Anybody else? Well, Mayor, please.
Get to transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody in Waukegan owns vehicles, and we need to have a foundation for them to get around everywhere, not just in Waukegan, but Lake County in general.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'm going to say is opportunities for our children. Like, again, we have a wonderful park district, but we need to make sure that everybody has accessibility, whether you can afford to use the programs or you can't afford to use the programs. Our kids need to have the same opportunities as those that come from families that can afford to give their families those things.
Really good point. So transportation was mentioned, and that, don't hold me to this number. I should have looked it up before I came in, but I think it's about 10,000 households in Waukegan that don't have a car. And about 13,000, including the 10,000, that only have either no cars or one car. And that really affects mobility and makes it difficult to get around a pretty big county and even a big city. So that is an issue. And then accessibility to programs and services, because they are here, but getting to them is not easy. So that clearly is an issue that if you're trying to solve the problem, you gotta look at that. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I see you have access to essential resources, but I thought I'd just call out specifically access to high-quality health care.
Yep. So access to high-quality health care is another issue. Would this be considered a healthcare desert in some ways or not? We've heard of food deserts and food insecurity. How about health care? Yes? Okay.
Quality health care, yes.
Okay. Yes? Yes,
To
sir.
add to the financial stability, I would say financial literacy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so financial literacy is another one. Right, I mean, my family, we're fairly well educated on financial matters. I have to admit, I didn't pass that on to my kids very well. So all of us kind of get affected by that, and understanding the importance of it in order to navigate the system that folks should become stable enough.
Because there might not be so much lack of money, but lack of knowledge of how to manage it.
Yeah.
I know that because I'm learning, because like I live by myself, go to school, so I got to pay everything on my own. And I'm just learning the importance of being financially literate and knowing how to manage your money.
Yeah, you have two choices, either become educated yourself or get married to somebody that knows how to help you. Yeah, so I chose the latter. Yeah.
Both if you're lucky.
I thought I heard another comment. Okay, well, that's a really good start. Thank you. And we're going to talk about some of those issues this afternoon. And what we're here to do today, I should have mentioned this, is really introduce to you what we think an opportunity collaborative might look like. And we're trying to figure that out. And we've been very clear, and we've learned over the 4-month period, we have a lot of really good providers here. There's a good foundation, but it is not set up to scale to the need. As somebody said in one of our interviews, there's a lot more demand than there is supply. And so meeting the demand, the market, it's kind of opening up a convenience store when you're trying to serve 89,000 people. That convenience store is not enough inventory to feed and to support 89,000 customers. So right now we may have a convenience store trying to serve a very large market. So let me go through this. What we're looking at is really trying to create for these economically distressed households and individuals pathways to prosperity. And you've identified some of what has to make up, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's access to health care, access to food, access to key services, able to be mobile and move around Lake County to get to where the opportunities are. All of those and more are really critical. And right now for many households, there are impediments to getting on the pathway and getting there. So how we create the pathway, we refer to a study that was done by Economic Innovation Group where they came up with an index for distress. They looked at things like poverty levels, median income, access to housing, education, a number of measures that were really important. And they identified distress by zip codes throughout the community, country, excuse me. And they found that many zip codes that back in 2000 that were distressed are still distressed when they completed this study in 2018. So there was not much movement. Even though we did prosperity growth in the country during that period, 2000 to 2018, if you happened to be in a zip code that was distressed in 2000, you were likely to be still distressed in 2018. And then what that tells us is those pathways were not available to those zip codes. And we've done a little bit of work at the census tract level and have kind of seen the same issue here. Those census tracts are kind of stuck in the mud and really don't have those access to the opportunities or the creation of the pathways. Shelley, anything you want to add to that? Okay. So again, it's a national problem. This is not just a Waukegan problem. There are some communities that are really working hard to address this. Waukegan, the city of Waukegan, Noel, the planning department, some of the providers in this community have said, we want to address it. We do think we could design to get better outcomes. Let's talk about that. So that's what we're doing here now. And you can see some of the measures that really go into looking at economic distress. One of the ones I want to call out is labor force participation. When we look at Waukegan, its labor force participation rate is significantly higher than the state norm or the national norm. State and national norm around 61, 62, 63%. Those are 2023 numbers. Might be a little higher today. In Waukegan, more like 65, 66, 67%. As many as 5 percentage points higher. People Waukegan are choosing to work. But they're not necessarily in the better paying jobs in some cases. And so the median income levels here are significantly lower even though people are working. So that's not a pathway to prosperity. So getting access to better paying jobs, training that gets you into those, that could be an issue. So am I to your point? Okay, let me just finish a couple slides here. I'm going to turn it over to Shelley when she kicks me. So I love this slide. Shelley put it together. And the pathway to prosperity ideally is on the left. Right now, for many, it's probably on the right. You're in the maze and you're not even sure where you're trying to get to. And then if you talk to many of the providers that are here to help get you there, they deal with one or two, or maybe at most, if you're lucky, 3 issues of several that you're trying to address. And they're probably overwhelmed. So they're going to give you a little bit of time, not a lot of time. And making sure you come out the other end better for the experience, not always the case. So how do we get out of the maze and over to the left and get that straight line to where you're trying to get to? And again, I believe firmly, I'm an old guy, I've been around, I've seen a lot of people go through a lot of different experiences, I've gone through different experiences. It feels like a maze most of the time. Does that make sense to most people? Okay. So really the question that we're trying to answer, and we think is possible, we didn't say easy, we just think it's possible. What if there was a clear place to access opportunity in Waukegan? What if everybody knew where to go? And it wasn't the 4 corners of Lake County, which is impossible to navigate, not even the 4 corners of Waukegan, which is still pretty intimidating to try to navigate, but there is a location or a small number of locations where people know to go as a starting point to get on that pathway to prosperity. It's comfortable, it's convenient to access. I know they'll get me pointed in the right direction on whatever my need is. And I know they'll stick with me from beginning to end to get to where I'm trying to go. If I am really trying financial literacy, as well as literacy on what does it take for me to get to where I want to go, that's not easy always to figure out. Many of us get confused by pathway and what it takes to get us to where we need to go. So somebody that understands that, can work with me, has patience with me, and will meet me where I'm at. I may need to take care of some issues before I can even get on the pathway. So can they meet me where I'm at? Can they help me get on that pathway? And then can they help me make sure that I'm going to be successful once I get on it? I need to do it. But if I have somebody mentoring me and helping me, that makes a big difference. So you can see here, I told Shelley, this is a kind of a potpourri of happy faces. So these are folks that obviously have been on the pathway and have a quality of life that really does take some of that distress out of their lifestyle. And to the point is that they feel like they have a sustainable lifestyle. They're not living in survivor mode anymore. They feel like they're growing and moving forward. So that is another piece that we're trying to, this is where you can, okay? I'm gonna turn mine off.
I'm assuming my.
Okay, so the question becomes what if, right? What if this place existed? What would it look like?
And we try to encourage organizations, whether it's cities or whatever the leadership may be around such an opportunity collaborative, which is usually multiple community leaders working together. What would it look like in terms of that community, what they're measuring for success in the various areas that you've identified?
You can imagine a dashboard that's measuring the opportunity dashboard in terms of tracking median incomes, tracking the workforce participation, tracking job and education attainment, tracking the availability but also the utilization of the different community services that exist, and then finally home ownership, which it could be renting successfully with landlords that are reliable. We all know in a lot of communities that's an issue. You know, how do I deal with the housing issues that I have with a landlord as opposed to maybe ultimately getting the home ownership? But imagine that there is a dashboard that everybody has their eyes on in terms of specific metrics in these categories and being able to show the community that there's progress occurring. You get what you measure. You know, if you're in a game, you want to see the scoreboard. A lot of communities are not doing this, and therefore, bless you. Therefore, they cannot really identify, they talk about the problems, they know they exist, but they really aren't seeing progress. And so we believe that communities that are successful with these concepts of collaboration, they're measuring it to some level. So wouldn't it be nice, with many of the things you're talking about, from financial to education and so forth, things you've listed here, what if we could really see that there was progress being made, aside from waiting for the census numbers to come out every few years, 10 years. So this requires, in your community, this is what it would begin to look like, is that everything from pre-K through 12 to the mayor's point of kids having opportunities to post-secondary education, internships, apprenticeships, incubators, accelerators, entrepreneurship through small business development, and then leading to the big category of jobs and the different trades that are developing skills for positions. You know where they are, right, where those trade and certifications are. You know where they are, and you know how it leads to a specific job with a specific employer. We call these career pathways. So ideally, the community, what we see is when the providers are working with the employers to connect the employers to residents for the positions they have available, and not only the training and development is being passed directly to them, but that long line across the bottom talks about the wraparound services, including all of these items, because what we hear so many times from employers, yeah, we hired somebody, but they don't stay in the job. Well, why don't they stay in the job? What would be the community-related, family-related issues that keep people from being able to participate consistently in a job? Now I'm asking you guys to shout out kind of some ideas. What would some of those reasons be?
No car.
Childcare or elder care?
Childcare, elder care, a car, and transportation, reliable transportation,
Healthcare. Healthcare.
healthcare. Yeah, so childcare, if anybody, I think elder care, you know, all those types of things are the reasons why. They're family, financial, systemic issues. And I've heard a million times of single mothers where I got a job, it's a great job, and a week later I can't go because my sister lost her job and I have to take care of all our kids. Right? So these are the real issues that occur. So employers don't understand it. They might get it somewhat, but they may not have HR departments that are all that sophisticated in understanding the reasons why people don't show up. They just get frustrated because it doesn't happen. Then you have all these service providers over here, right, that are actually providing the services that may not be connected to the employers to know that in that moment when someone's struggling, they could actually step in and help and make sure that they're able to show up for work the next day. And it's all of those disconnections that occur, and obviously financial stability, to your point, is in feeling that sustainable level, because when you get married, you find your smart wife that, you know, is actually one paying bills maybe, in order to create that career pathway. And we know in your community that there are a number of jobs, and I know you know this chart, I can't read it, in terms of the types of industries that are those growing industries that are providing better paying jobs.
Yep. So, and that is the key. I mean, it'd be one thing if you were in a marketplace where there was no opportunity. There is ample opportunity in Lake County. Getting to it is hard for some folks, but if you look at the top part of this diagram, those are higher paying jobs. Where the stars are, and especially as you go down to the lower paying jobs, as you go down from top to bottom, that's where people are working from Waukegan. And most of them are working in the lower wage jobs. So the jobs are out there to connect to that pay better wages. As Shelley just mentioned, the connection points aren't there to those jobs. And it normally is a pathway to get there. You just don't walk in and say, hey, I want to be a CNC CNC operator hiring. Well, that requires some training. And you have to have some level of training, just basic training, to even get into the training to operate the machine that's going to pay you well. So how do I do that? I have no idea where to start if that's the job I want. Those jobs are out here, but you're going to have to point me in the right direction, and then I'm going to have to make a commitment to take advantage of the direction you pointed me in. So those are all, again, ample opportunity. It's just getting the connection points.
So in Waukegan, we feel there's lots of service providers. A lot of service providers that were reinforced financially since COVID through a lot of the funding that came through. Lots of service providers. In fact, there's more service providers than we typically see in a community. So the resources are there, right? Then we know there's strong industry and strong jobs and strong employment base here. But again, it's that connection in between. So what if there was a place, more than one place potentially, that was that entry point with transportation and all the things provided to get to where people need to go, that cover the basis of the spectrum that you see here on this slide, which includes adult training and education, child care, and early learning. You've got the next generation of technology. A lot of manufacturers are still kind of doing old school things, but they're only going to get away with that for so long. There's new technologies in CNC, in engineering fields, that people can easily walk into without needing to get a 4-year degree for some of these positions, but they can get the certifications along the way to learn technology solutions. Innovation and entrepreneurship. What if you want to start a business? We look at the Main Street here. We talked with the mayor and Noel about the fact that, there's a Main Street that has some great bones of buildings that are pretty exciting. I know that we've had service providers, move out of downtown for the sake of trying to build up a retail, mixed-use, exciting place to be for downtown. And it would be small businesses that are going to populate those storefronts. So who do you go to in the community to learn how to start a business? How to do books, how to market yourself, how to put systems and processes in place so that you can scale your business, so that those storefronts are getting built. Beyond working out of your home, there's great home-based businesses that are making things in their garage too. I mean, still they need help and support before they move on to maybe a storefront downtown. There's a lot of good small businesses that are operating out of their home as well. A lot of women are doing that. Okay? Health and wellness, arts and culture, transportation and mobility, parks, trails, recreation, housing, and the development of communities and neighborhoods are all incorporated into this. So what we have found that proximity matters. Having all of these resources based on the assets that a community needs most in one place, close to the proximity of the households in need. So we talk about distressed census tracts, which Mike's going to talk about in a minute. We looked at 19 different census tracts. We know where, in fact, most distress is in the households and the neighborhoods. And if you center that, which Mike will be showing you, if we had a place that started to redevelop and create a new sense of neighborhoods, you had a lot of new population come in, right? With immigration, you had population movement happening here, much more than other communities that we've seen. So the reestablishment of community and neighborhoods is really important. Do you know your neighbor? You need to get to know your neighbor. Your neighbor is different than it was 5 years ago, right? But those neighborhoods and those connections need to happen inside the neighborhoods. But then to have these resources within, ideally, walkable, bikeable distance. We've been talking to PACE as well. They're always trying to figure out the routes and where to be able to route people. Well, if there were as a place or a couple places in key neighborhoods that are redeveloping to support new families and connections in neighborhoods, then all of a sudden, you have the transportation ideally, and you have the walkable, bikeable solutions that are starting to establish new neighborhood centers. And then service providers are more directed around being able to scale. Because that's the issue. You can have a lot of service providers, but no one service provider will ever fill a gap in the need that there is in the community. No one will. And what we see happen is the service providers in all these categories, they are passionate about what they do. They believe in what they do so much that they want to save. We heard from one person that, that they say, everybody wants to save the community, right? And because there's limited funding, they want to be the ones to do it so they get more funding, ideally, right? If you're serving more people, you get more funding. Well, most funders these days are only given money if there's collaboration across multiple, right? We talked about this. And so, therefore, if there's no collaboration and people aren't working in silos, that means there will be less funding coming in. Of course, we get federal administration changes that have different ideas about where funding should go, as we all know, as we're exhausted by it. So all these things are always changing, all the time. And so how do we start to plan and be intentional around this? And we believe proximity matters, intentional focus of service providers to scale together and stop with the silos, and start thinking about those end users and having those access points that make sense. So the question, that we start to come at is where. We'd like you to be thinking about this because we're going to do some Q&A around this. Where are those, and we believe there's more than one, those key locations that are vibrant, there's places to go, there's things to do, there's already maybe some service providers existing, that start to coalesce into what would be this opportunity collaborative area that's accessible where people would want to go, and where there's households very nearby. A good bus route nearby to address those transportation issues. So it can be a hub, one location. It can be a campus with multiple locations nearby. Satellite locations, maybe they branch off and have smaller offices in and around. Probably have a lot of that maybe going on now. And then even mobility of units that go out and help people with their resumes and whatever. They go to the neighborhoods. This can look a lot of different ways. But are there ideas of locations that start to come to mind? So we're going to get to that, so be thinking. So an opportunity collaborative is first and foremost a community-led effort. Without community leadership that's working together, strong community leadership. Initially, it's usually only 5, 6 key community leaders that are deciding we're going to change the system and how this works. And then they attract all the other people to follow their lead. But all you need is a handful of people. Who are those community leaders that should be at this table? We're going to be asking you that question too. Okay? Because it's not us. We aren't here, Noel, the mayor, did not bring us into this for us to do this. We are facilitators. Okay? So this is you guys figuring this out and coming up with ideas and shooting them back to us so that we can be collecting that information and be thinking about it. And even if you think about it tomorrow, if you go to collaborate.waukegan.com, we created a website that has this market report and some of the slides we're sharing with you. And there's a comment feedback area where you can shoot us 5, 10, we don't care, different responses with ideas because we're in that mode. All right, so community-focused led leadership from inside. It's focused on centralizing your existing and new organizations into that one, either physical and or, likely, virtual access point. If you're at home and if you have a phone or a computer, a lot of people don't, they might have to go to the library, who knows, right? However, if they want to do it virtually, they can initially to get comfortable before they walk into a door. But that door is safe, it's accessible, it's friendly, it's social, it's fun, it's a place where you want to be. It's not the intimidation of walking into, say, an unemployment office or a courthouse or all the feelings that people get. Some people get that feeling just about school. Okay? Next, there is a unified path or access to the services like we talked about, not the maze. It's up to the service providers to work together to create a straight line. It's scaled to community needs. No one organization will ever scale to the need. If they think they are, they got to get their ego out of the way. That's the way we look at it. Because it takes multiple of them working together, because they'll never get there without that attitude. And it's not intimidating and confusing. Okay? So that's what we're imagining as the type of place, what we would see happening to address the types and the areas of success that you want for yourselves and the community. And Mike's going to spend a little bit of time now diving a little bit deeper into some of the findings that we had. I would encourage you, and there's reports here, there's one page that is accurate on the website and not here, we exited out so you'll know. But there is a report, you can get a hard copy of it that has a lot more of the details, and even has some slides that have additional details. We aren't going into all that here today, but you're free to go, download, look, and take a copy here as well.
Thank you. Shelley already knows this. I think Noelle knows it. I am the least observant person that exists. I'm looking back here to see what slide's up, and then I watch forward to look at the screen that's right in front of me. So, when I was speaking before, I didn't even see that screen. So, please turn you away from in that way. So, I mentioned a study that Economic Innovation Group did about distressed community index, and they kind of indexed every zip code in America and where the distress was occurring. This is their map. If you go to Economic Innovation Group, if you Google that, you'll find their good work. You'll find the DCI index, the Distressed Community Index, and you can go anywhere in the country to see where distress exists. Here we are on the interactive map. This is a clip of it, and you can see Waukegan with the orange is indicative, they're showing distress. Significant distress in the community of Waukegan when it comes to economics. Not anything that you don't already know. You're in a very affluent county, but Waukegan is not necessarily connected to some of that opportunity, and it's resulted in a certain level of distress. It's not to say that everybody in Waukegan is experiencing that, but there is a significant amount of it that then results in that rating for Waukegan. So we'll start there. The other thing I want to do, we're not going to get into it tonight. If we had more time, we would. But many of you are sitting there saying, okay, that sounds great, but how are you going to pay for it? And we do have a business model that assumes that, number one, you start by organizing the existing resources a little bit better than they are now and make that more efficient, but that you also create a business plan for this. So it will require a little more capital to provide scale up to the need, but there's also an opportunity to generate resources locally, as well as bring in some outside money for the seed capital to start it up. So there is a business plan, and someday, maybe at the next public meeting, some of that detail, but it's got to be sustainable. The one thing Shelley and I have worked on, putting this together, is that within 3 or 4 years, this has to stand on its own feet, and it's got to be economically sustainable so the community doesn't have to worry about it going. We want to design a better mousetrap. We want that mousetrap to create better impact, and we want it to make an economic difference at the household level, the neighborhood level, and on the community level, but without raising money all the time. It's got to be sustainable. Know that that's part of the plan as we're talking about doing this in a way that makes a difference. So we start with kind of looking at Waukegan census tracts. This is hard to read, but we look at measures like poverty, like median income, number of youth within the census tract, the percentage of youth, education attainment, and labor force participation. All really important variables as you start to try to figure out if a census tract is doing really well or not doing well at all, or somewhere in between. And then we also use kind of the state as a baseline. You know, what's the norm in the state for poverty? It's almost 12%, just under 12%. What's the baseline for household median income? 81,000. These are all 2023 numbers, by the way. But about 81,000, almost 82,000 for our household median income. What's the education attainment level? It's in the 60s. What's the labor force participation rate? It's in the low 60 percentile. So we use that as the baseline and then measure Waukegan at each census tract, measure those levels against the baseline of Illinois. And if it's well below what Illinois is experiencing, the lower it is, the more distress we feel for that particular measure, whether it's poverty, household median income, education attainment, you name it. So that's what we went through. And then we gave orange and red colors to those measures that either orange, significant distress, red, severe distress. Where you see red in that far right column, that's education attainment. We have an undereducated or underprepared is a better way to put it. They could be well educated, but they may not be prepared for some of the better paying jobs that are out there. And education is one of the measures we use to know whether you're prepared for some of the work that is going to compensate in other types of jobs. And you can see we have a big gap in education attainment between the baseline in Illinois and what each of these census tracts. And again, Shelley mentioned, we'll hand them out. You'll be able to look at this more closely and actually be able to read it. But to the left, you can see each row is a census tract. You have 31 census tracts in Waukegan, in Lake County, that touch Waukegan. Only 19 of them have the majority of their land area within the city limits. So we looked at those 19. We looked at the 19 census tracts that have approximately 75% of their land area within the city limits. And then we rated each of them. If you see green or blue, that's low distress if it's blue, and moderate distress if it's green. So you have a little bit of that showing up, and you have actually 5 census tracts that really don't have any significant or severe distress. But you have the remainder, the 14, that do. And you can see that on poverty, we have probably more red there as a second column to education attainment. Poverty has quite a few in the red column. Poverty rates anywhere from, again, we use the state average of just under 12%, anywhere from 10 to 31% poverty levels in some of these census tracts. So significant poverty, but it's concentrated. And this is kind of like trying to figure out where we put a grocery. Where are the customers, as Shelley mentioned? Where do people feel the most need and feel the most distress? By doing it at the census tract level, we can identify where the people live and where it might make sense to try to place the services conveniently for them to access, because it really does start with connection. And if they can't connect easily, it's not going to happen. Kind of losing your internet signal because of a poor connection. What do? You're hopeless. Well, we're trying to make that connection as strong as possible here. Any questions on this or any thoughts? I may not have explained it fully. I'd be glad to give you a little more clarity if you have any questions. Okay. That means I'm just boring you to death, or yes, please.
How do we know where those census tracts are?
We're going to show you a map. Yep, it's a good question, and it does make a difference on where they are. So I guess I didn't realize it was the next slide, but thank you for the help. So you can see this is, we have the other map of, we're going to use this one. So you can see the census tracts there. Most, the I'm going to go back to this. You can see the census tracts that are not experiencing much distress, northern edge of Waukegan, and a little bit of green out to the west and to the south. Everything in the middle of Waukegan, for the most part, is severely distressed or significantly distressed. So it's kind of the core area. And what we've done here is that little green circle in the middle, that is a 1 mile radius. And when we look at that 1 mile radius, we tried to identify the area that would touch most of the distress within Waukegan. And when you look at your map that you get in this copy or you get on the website, Census Tract 8620 was the census tract that was kind of the center point for what we're talking about. And that's Grand, and what did we decide the north-south, that was it?
Lewis crosses in about
Yeah.
on the west side of the north-south portion of it.
Yeah, so you kind of have Grand going across and then Lewis in the middle someplace. And we figured just south of Grand, 8620 was the center point. And when we look at that center point in that census tract touches some of the most populated census tracts with distress. Most of your tracts have about a population of 3,000, 3,500 in them. The census tracts that census tract touches have anywhere from close to 8,000 to about 5,000. The top 5 census tracts are right there next to 3620. So you have significant population, significant households. You can look at those census tracts individually and see significant change over the last 15 to 20 years. So this starts to, again, let's imagine we're trying to set up a grocery store and we want to find where our customers are. And we're not doing a convenience store. We want to do a full-service grocery store that services the customers. You put that grocery store or this hub or one place, the nervous center for all this collaboration, you'd put it somewhere in that green circle because people would find it easy to get to. Doesn't mean they're going to come. That's another issue. But if you're going to make it convenient and friendly, some people will call it a third space in the community where I want to hang out. And by hanging out, I'm much more likely to connect. You're on that pathway. So, and again, this map has the same 1 mile radius and the 3 mile radius to kind of show you that you really touch a great deal of Waukegan. You can see the census tracts a little better here and the geography of Waukegan. So you can start to relate to the street grid to kind of locate where we're talking about. And again, 8620 is right in the middle of it. You can see right in the middle of that circle, the green circle, 8620 kind of called out. Questions on any of that? Do you like the thinking? Does the thinking follow? Anybody want to challenge that? Talk to Shelley? No. Anybody want to challenge it?
Not challenge it, maybe agree with it.
Okay.
Because, I work for a nonprofit community organization.
Mm-hmm.
One of our main things is case management for like basic needs.
Yep.
And I really like the point where you say where we need a program or something, an entity or something where it could refer us to the step-by-step process and the actual resources for each step.
Yep.
That's kind of the main basis that we do with case management at ours. We're a referral-based organization, so we don't have any, like, let's say, per se, they're looking for rental assistance, housing, clothes, and food. We don't necessarily have any of that per se, but we do refer them to the organizations that do have those resources.
Yep.
You know, and those are developed through connections, personal connections.
Yep.
So I would like to completely agree with that when it comes to prosperity and stability, because I don't think it's just people in poverty. I think it's an important factor for everybody, to be able to be financially literate, financially stable, and just along with everything on that list. Speaking for myself and for the general public as well.
Really good point. So I'm going to use, and Shelley will tell you, I never use this analogy as much as I'm using it tonight. I don't know what's wrong with me, but let's use the grocery store analogy. Let's assume we have a hub, And people are coming in, and it's like a grocery store. It's set up like a grocery store. Imagine a grocery store with the aisles not labeled. You have no idea where to find anything. And so I find it when they're labeled, I find it hard enough to shop. It's impossible. I'm going to be in there all day long. And if I'm looking for all those services you just mentioned, and somebody can't help navigate me to those services, I'm lost. I'm already uncomfortable just walking in. But if you don't make it easy for me to navigate a very complicated system, and it is a complicated system, you're in trouble. And I'd probably starve to death before I go into a grocery store with no labels on it. It's already a bad enough experience as it is, so that speaks to it.
Yeah, and if I can follow along with what you're saying, because we find that, like, even if somebody is providing a specific service, and they still are gonna have to refer, because no one ever needs just one service, hardly ever, right? I mean, it does exist, but a lot of times it doesn't. So when you refer, and you do the handoff, do you ever know what happens from there?
Technically, like on paper, we set up a action plan for them, but in reality, not really. We don't know.
Yeah, and that's what we hear. We work with lots of nonprofits. In Northwest Indiana, we're working with probably 40 to 50 nonprofits and doing this kind of work and getting them centralized at specific locations and working together. And that's what they all say. You know, we do the handoff, but we don't know what really happens. And then when we talk to like United Way organizations, they are trying to track some of that. And they say the majority of the time, the people don't even show up for the handoff. Why is that, do you think?
Maybe I would say, from my personal experience, I think it could be like two things. Mostly it'll be a lack of trust. Like, for example, if I'm looking for housing, and then I've been referred to PADS, but PADS is always over, like the line is just so long. So if I refer them to PADS, and let's say I have a personal connection with somebody in PADS where I can guarantee them the help, they just don't have that confidence that they're going to be helped, so they won't even show up.
Yeah.
But they don't really have the trust that the help is actually there. And also, I feel like sometimes people, once they do get the help, that sometimes people are so in contact with us because they need the help, but once they get it, they're not really there. They won't really be so willing to give the feedback on if they're satisfied or not, or did they get what they want or not, Which is understandable, I get it, but
Why don't you think they get the feedback?
Because it's like I got what I wanted, so goodbye, that kind of attitude, which is
But they may
understandable.
have followed through on it and you don't know, or did it get lost?
What was that?
Well, do you think that maybe they did follow through and you just don't know, or did it get lost and they just gave up?
Well, it could be both. I just think that, for example, when they did follow through, and let's say they ended up getting what they needed, they're not going to be so eager to talk to us afterwards,
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to say in Rockford, they've done something very similar around domestic violence, where they have one place that people go, and there's 30 to 40 not-for-profits that all work together. And the reason being is domestic violence isn't based about one thing. It's often you've got women that need housing, they need counseling, they need clothing, food, all of that, addiction, all of that. So these opportunity centers work in other communities and they are out there. We've just never done it in Waukegan.
Yeah, and it's really ideal for your community.
I guess just to add, I think one step that we're doing towards that is the resource fairs that we have. So like example, at our nonprofit, we collaborate with like 10 to 15 different organizations, and we do like an art organization because we know it's a safe space for some of our clients. And once they get it, even if it's like example, like 10 people attending the resource fair, word of mouth in Waukegan is really, really big. So I think that's one step of moving towards that.
Yeah, that's
What's marketing it, organizing it, paying for it, so doing it together, it helps with that.
Good. I think maybe 2 more slides, and then we turn it back over. So just real quickly, I mean, here are some of the issues where, I think we've covered. I won't go into great detail here, but certainly Waukegan is really unique given the shift in population demographics you've had here. And that can be a liability or it can be an asset. Clearly, when you have that much change in population and new people that come into the community, getting them rooted into the community needs to serve them, but they need to serve the community. And when that's not happening, you really don't have much of a sense of community. So with the change, getting that fabric of the community back in place is really important. And that is clearly an issue that has to be addressed here. Resource fairs probably help a lot. People come out, they relate, they talk, they connect. That's all good work. Slow to declining growth, both in population. Workforce population is actually in decline. You're losing workforce population, and that's a bit of an issue. Now, that may turn around in a few years, but right now it's in decline. And your population in Waukegan in general is in decline. 89,000 people in the city limits in 2020, 87,000 in 2023. So declining population. You don't want that. You want some level of growth, both in population and households. Slow median income growth, and actually we found census tracts where the household median income dropped. Over that 2020 to 2022 period, people were losing their spending power, and they didn't have much to begin with. So that's a real issue, and how to change that has to be attacked. That has to be attacked on a macro level, not a micro level. A few households at a time is not going to get the job done. It's not going to turn your neighborhoods around, it's not going to turn your household around. And then low-wage jobs. You have plenty of low-wage jobs. You also have an abundance of higher-wage jobs. They're just not getting connected to the folks that would really like to connect to them. And so that's got to be one of the issues that gets attacked. It can be done. It can be done. And it is happening in this community, by the way. We're being kind of downers right now, Debbie Downers, but there are good providers doing this work. They just can't do it at scale. I got to get over here because they can't hear me. Talking about poor connections. So, what are the strategic opportunities for success? I think this is my last slide, Shelley. So, number one, identify the barriers. Know what you're trying to fix. You got to know the problem before you can fix it. And your providers and you as a community know them, but we got to put them on the table and say, okay, what do we do about these barriers? We have to address them, both systemic barriers and the barriers to the people that we're trying to get the services to. How do we address those? Access and scale, huge. I mean, you have a significant customer base, and most of them are not getting served adequately. Again, convenience store trying to service 89,000 people. You need a supermarket. You need a super center, and you don't have that super center right now. It doesn't have to be just in one location, but it's got to be at scale. Local and regional economy, a strength, but you got to tap into it. You have a robust, I've worked in many communities that don't have a market, and so it's really hard to get the momentum to turn that around. You have a market. And that's a positive, and it's something you ought to be excited about, but you got to connect to it better than we're connecting to it right now. And then building. This is not coming in with a whole new system and saying, scrap, nothing's working, we got to start fresh. You have a provider base. So Shelley talks, as I talk, city talks, we're building off of what's here now. They have to be the answer. They have to participate. What's going to be new for many of them, not all of them, what's going to be new for many of them is, Shelley said it, they got to get out of their silos. They can't be comfortable just doing their thing and not collaborating with all the others. They do their thing, they're serving a small number of people, they collaborate with others, they expand their capacity as well as the capacity of the system, and they serve more people, and then they also have the ability to generate more resources because they're having more impact. And that's going to be the name of the game. As we've talked, we all know at the federal level, things are changing. On one hand, resources are going to get more scarce, but there are going to be some new opportunities, and if we show we can be effective and have real impact, we can tap into we can adapt to what's going to be a changing environment out there, and that's critical to be strategic about. Okay, Shelley, you're going to bring us home?
All right.
Okay.
So we got almost a half an hour left, all right? We wanted to use this
Time really for more conversation.
So,
The first question, capture.
problem for me to, okay, so Mike, you're gonna have to write.
Okay, that was great. My writing is so good.
All right, so in terms of service providers who you think come to mind, top of mind, it could be a category, but even if they're specific service providers, and by mentioning a specific service provider, you aren't leaving anybody out. We don't want you to feel like, you're raising your hand for one service provider and you're leaving anybody else out. But we do want to know the stronger service providers, that if you hear a concept like this, who should be at the table? Thank you, Rachel.
I'm left-handed, I write like
Okay, so Pat? Who else?
Nicasa, Behavioral Services.
Mikasa?
Or NERCO. NERCO.
Durko? Caps?
Lake County.
Community Action Partnership?
Say Family First Center.
Family First Center?
Also 211.
And United Way.
United Way? And what's the other one?
211. It's part of United Way.
Immigration Service Providers? Immigration Service Providers?
So like ACES, Mano a Mano.
Who else? Who
Safe
should be the
Place.
people at the table?
Safe Place.
Safe Place?
Domestic Violence.
Domestic violence, yep. I'm repeating for these people.
Statement House.
Township.
Township? And what was the one that you said?
Statement House, but that's township. Part of it.
Okay. Who else should be at the table?
Well, I mean, the Park District, I mean, they're not the same kind of provider they are, but they're definitely a community
Yep. Well,
resource.
parks, trails, bikeability, all connect together, and when there's strong trail systems, and I've had a lot of workforce board type people that when there's money out there from the state, they've been dedicating a lot to parks and trails, and the workforce people are frustrated because they're like, a park, a trail or whatever. However, it provides the accessibility, right? It's that quality of place and that connection between neighborhoods that makes it walkable and bikeable. But if people don't have cars, that's obviously great. But there is a sense of just recreation around that too that builds up neighborhoods, right?
I'm going to say CLC.
CLC,
Needs to be at the table.
Library is a place of trust.
library is a place of trust.
PACE.
Yeah, Pace was 30 minutes.
Pace,
Waukegan Public Schools.
public schools,
Youth Build.
youth build,
Oh, yeah.
And YCC.
NYCC,
No, just YCC.
YCC. Is that youth build or is that separate?
They're two different things.
They're two different ones. Tell me more about youth build. I haven't heard about youth build. What's youth build?
So I'm with Youth Build Lake County, and we serve youth ages 16 to 24 to earn their high school diploma, but also industry recognized credentials in construction. So
Awesome.
training for the workforce.
Very important. So a lot of CTE classes, as we call them, that are the hands-on learning, construction, welding, mechanics, HVAC. That's real important stuff. Those are good paying jobs, being an electrician, all of that.
I'd like to add something to that. And he didn't have his high school diploma. He went, he graduated, got his high school diploma, and they were able to connect him as becoming a mechanic. And now he's getting paid, like he's working with heavy machinery, getting paid much better than he was working at a factory.
Absolutely. Those are the stories right there. That is it. You know, whether you're a guy and you want to be a mechanic,
Or you're a lady and you want to be a nail tech, I don't care, but
it leads to those sustainable wages that we talked about.
Lake County Job Center?
Lake County Job Center,
Yeah.
that sounds important.
That's part of the Workforce Development Department.
Oh, okay.
Lake County Health Department?
Lake County Health Department. Now, one thing we've heard, the Lake County organizations, so the county organizations, the ones you're mentioning do a good job of serving Waukegan specifically? Do you feel the ones that have been mentioned?
If they're Lake County, they're serving the whole county as opposed to just Waukegan.
Right, but just as long as they're serving Waukegan well is what we're really caring about, right? Because some of them may not, I don't know.
So many of them have locations in Lake County, so they, in Waukegan.
In Waukegan, that's what's key, because it's got to be accessible, right? And there could be good ones that don't have a location here, that maybe should still be in the hub, so they are here too, right?
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking. You know, you should have a healthcare partner. It could certainly be the Lake County Health Department, but it could also be Phoenix, which is a free clinic, and Highwood, which is in the south of our county.
Yeah.
We have an FQHC here, Erie. Getting your hospital partners involved and perhaps leveraging community benefit dollars for this.
Very important. We're doing that in other communities, and that's very important. But especially when we talked about quality health care, as you did, feeling it's not here for those healthcare providers, because there's been a lot of hospitals that have shut down or consolidated, so they can't serve all the communities enough. But if they have an access point like this that doesn't require all the resources for a full hospital, you can get a lot more providers in the communities. That's really cool. What else?
Erie Family Health Center.
Erie Family Health Center?
They have the Rosalind, they have a local clinic, they assist them.
Okay. Very good.
City of Hope,
City of Hope.
their cancer treatment.
Look at all the great service providers that exist, right? And you think these are the people that should be at the table, right? That you hear of that are serving the community well, so that's a good long list.
Do we
I
mention
think
any
the grocery store
childcare?
needs to be a Costco. Huh?
Do we mention any childcare?
Why do you say that?
Okay.
Kids Above All is another one that provides childcare and counseling services.
Other legal service providers, like once you go to the grade, paralegal. When those come up, those are good.
We have a cool food pantry that's been around for a long time.
Catholic Charities.
Oh, yeah, Catholic Charities.
Are they pretty active?
I haven't heard much feedback.
We've heard that.
They've had a couple challenges, but they're still serving.
Okay, good to know.
How
We
about
keep hearing mixed.
financial literacy? Did anybody filling that void that we've mentioned, or anybody that's out there?
Love Inc. does some of that. They do some financial training. And they also have like furniture available to people who need assistance that way. They're here in Waukegan.
Okay, great, thank you.
I've never heard of it.
Okay, good, so that's a good segue too. Unless anybody has a screaming one to put up here, I'm gonna move to what's missing. So as we think about all of these great service providers and, you know, referrals that, or maybe needs that people have that you don't have a good referral for, that you hear in the community.
Well, I think you touched on one of the big problems earlier is the fact that they're operating in silos and there's so many people, not so many, but there's often people providing the same services and kind of almost competing against each other in a way for the dollars that are available. And we do have services that aren't being offered enough, like financial services and other things.
The financial services.
I think one area that's missing is the business community, because, you know, again, today I did a business tour, and they have good paying jobs, but it's the fact that the community doesn't necessarily know about those jobs. And there's not a way for them to really hear about those jobs. They do some work with the high schools, but if you don't ever really hear about those, and for much of our community, college is not always the option. They, like CLC is a great option because it gives them the introduction that if they do want to go on, they can go through University Center, but it lets them not carry so much debt that, you know, we've kind of taught our community for a long time college was the only option. And it's not the only option for a lot of people, whether it's your family finances, you know, whatever it is. There are really good paying jobs in our community, but the business community doesn't necessarily know how to get in touch with those that need the services.
So
It's a
to mention
connection
my
to
quote,
employers.
Mayor, college may not be for everyone, but education is.
Absolutely.
And so that's the key. You don't have to have a 4-year degree, but you certainly have, can go a couple semesters, get your HVAC license.
Yep.
The Waukegan Public Schools are in the process of opening a wraparound center.
Yes.
Which I mean, they changed what they were doing so many times, I don't know what they finally ended on. Because originally it was going to be for everybody in the community, and then it was only going to be for the school families. I don't know where we finally.
We spoke with them just in on the last month or two. Yeah. And initially they were thinking just the families, but it's available for anyone.
Okay, so they're back to that again. So anyway, I mean, that is a place that sounds a little like what you're talking about here. It's not quite in the location,
Yep.
which some of us bought them on when it came, but it's just down here around the corner. But it sounds like sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah. And we've, you've got the community works, you've got your township. They're all kind of coalescing, partnerships in these ways. So that's good, that's positive, that's something to leverage and to build on, potentially. And that's why that campus idea, there could be multiple service providers that aren't in the same building, but they're a block from each other. That's kind of the campus idea, right? And then you get mixed use and housing and things like that mixed in there, then all of a sudden you have a neighborhood community center that everybody wants to be at. It's got fun things to do, and it's got serious, I'm going to support my family things to do.
How about a housing authority?
Housing authority, yeah.
One of the things that I think we are really missing is, where's the funders? I think the vast majority of us rely on their support, those big family foundations, those large entities that, whose mission is to serve communities in distress just like ours, but where are they at the table?
Yep. What else is missing? Any service areas where you feel there's a gap that could be filled by bringing people into the community or having people in the community expand services in areas that are needed? Have we just figured it all out?
Well, in terms of who you have named on the left side, unless it's embedded in one of their programs, I'm not really seeing the arts community reflected. So bringing them in, whether it's for a public mural on the outside of the building or to give classes or.
And that's a way of stimulating attraction and socialization and the word of mouth. When there's a lack of these systems, it sounds like you've developed a word of mouth community, which is great. But when you're doing things like that, it even grows further.
How about Waukegan Friends, who services our LGBTQ community?
And I was thinking the same thing, but in terms of the LGBTQ Center of Lake County, which is a similar organization.
The county does a survey every 4 or 5 years, I think, and they try to get everyone in the county to answer it. Of course, they don't, but when they did it the last time, one of the things that struck me is, one of the questions was, do you have $400 to meet an emergency? And they teased out the Waukegan numbers for us, kind of like your map, but not quite, where it was 87 and 85, the zip code, so the north part of the city, south part of the city. And the majority of the people in our community don't have $400 for an emergency. And we know nowadays that's way less than a hot water heater or a muffler or, you know, some, whatever. Or God forbid you break your leg and can't go to work or something like that. But yet those same people answered the question, do you feel you're in danger of losing your housing? And they said no. So the financial literacy, I think, is humongous because they don't understand the disconnect between those two questions. Because if you don't have $400 in the bank, you are in danger of losing your housing whether you know it or not, in my opinion. Because I don't think there's too many rents or house payments that are less than $400.
Right. I'm going to tell kind of a personal story here is, but I think everybody knows me that I came from immigrant parents. I'm going to tell you, immigrant parents, when they come to this country, they run most of their life in survival mode. Because suddenly the healthcare system is different, job availability is different. When my father came to this country, he was actually told by Sears Automotive, if no other American applies, we will look at you. You couldn't be part of a union at that time. Very scary for immigrants coming to this country. And then when you add on the factors for many people who have the language barrier on top of that, it is so overwhelming that you end up living most of your life in survival mode. Being the second generation, I didn't have to go through that. I have had many nights watching my parents cry, not knowing that they could make their bills. Thank goodness that wasn't passed on when I was second generation here. But that changes your financial literacy because when you are in survival mode, you are just getting through the day. You are not talking about. There's two things you never talk about. It's money and death. You never talk about funeral arrangements or anything like that. Now being the second generation, my approach with my kids and financial literacy was very different. And I will tell you a trick that I taught my kids at a very young age. When they were 2 and 5, I would give them their age and allowance. And there were 3 buckets that they would put the money into. There was long-term, short-term, and taxes. My mother looked at me like I had 10 heads. Why would you do something like that? But it was important for kids to learn at a very early age that whatever paycheck you get, you don't get the whole paycheck. And that you do have to put money aside for long-term things. So later when they were older and understood, they understood that's my housing. This is my grocery money. This is what I can do for my discretionary funds. That was something I was never taught because when you're in survival mode, you don't teach those things. So my kids were raised in a very different atmosphere than I was raised. And consequently, they've been taught generational wealth, which is different and sets them up for a whole different lifestyle than what you're taught when your parents are struggling just to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And we got about 10 minutes left, so.
Yeah, 7, yeah. No, that's a good point, and that shows the progression that we're really trying to do from whether it's immigrants or you've got just your distressed communities, people that have been here second, third generation. And so you have to deal with that. And I will just say, before we go to the last question, which I want you to be thinking about as I make the final comment, that's where would ideal locations be in your mind for such a collaborative that we're talking about? All right, so I'm going to ask you that, and that'll be our final question.
And some of you that have not yet participated, you don't want to leave here without participating. So,
That's right. We won't let you out.
Yeah, please give us some input from you as well.
Yeah. And the one thing I do want to say about the immigration thing, because that's really come up a lot in the community discussions we've had. Like I said before, you have a large amount of immigrants, and we know the numbers that we're showing don't reflect that. All right, so we're aware of that. We know that. We're using what we have as a baseline for that. And as a community, you know, for communities that have such a large volume of new population coming in, such as you do, there's kind of a not dealing with it, or not knowing how to talk about it, or not knowing what are we going to, you know, how do we provide services? Who's going to pay for the services, right? Those are all valid questions that a community like yours has to be working on, right? It's not going to go away. The strategies have to be figured out. And yet, when early new changes happen in any community, and for you, if it's immigration, it could be something else as well on top of that, I don't know. But whatever those issues are, collaboratives and people coming together and talking about them requires that vulnerability, that openness, that ability to be able to talk about these things, because otherwise, what do? We avoid it. And when we avoid something, what happens? It gets bigger and it grows 10 heads, right? And 10 arms and 10 legs and you know, 20 brains, you know, all of a sudden we don't know what to do with it. So I just encourage that as you think about this, the solutions have to come through vulnerability. Vulnerability, if you ever read Brené Brown, I encourage you to. She's done all sorts of research on vulnerability. It is required for courage. And communities need courage to deal with these types of issues, whether we want to look at it as distressed communities and neighborhoods, or whether we want to look at it as you have great diversity. I mean, the diversity map that we showed, the diversity is amazing, right? We talk about, we just heard today in one of our discussions we had about the idea of diversity in minorities. Well, in your community, the minorities are the majorities, right? So we start using different language, for God's sake, right? So it's really thinking all that through in the culture you're trying to create around something like this, and doing it very differently than you ever thought of before. So where should the ideal locations, because there's going to be more than one pop up, what comes to mind?
Downtown?
Downtown? Why do you say downtown?
Because it's more of a general area where everybody knows, you know, as opposed to anywhere else.
Okay.
It's more attractive.
The library is a place that a lot of people go that, of all types of stuff, so that's what I think.
So downtown, the library, because of it's known. Okay, good. Where else?
A place where there's transportation that can drop them off and they can get to.
So public transportation.
Are there 2 or 3 spots that come to mind that transportation is really good? Downtown. Yeah.
Just one, downtown, for transportation?
When you say Grand and Lewis was kind of the hub,
That's a center point. Anything within a 1-mile radius of that.
there's bus routes along there, I think.
Yeah, but usually people here downtown is where all these.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a central hub of transportation then.
Spoken of.
Does that make sense to you, saying transportation? Okay.
You know, when you have City Hall, when you have CLC, when you have the courthouse, when you have Waukegan Public Schools coming in, you're creating a downtown that's going to get busier as the years go by. So it's just getting fuller.
Which is good.
That's awesome. Gosh.
I do want to acknowledge, though, backing up just slightly about the immigrant community, I think there's a lot more stress in the last 3 months with what's going on nationally in our community.
Yep.
And rightfully so.
Yep.
And I think that that's kind of amped everything up for the people who
No
live
question, no question. And, you know, on that point, whether it's immigration, like I said, or anything, there are these macro trends, these big trends that occur. and they have stress points where they influx, and all those things happen. And distressed communities, just basic financial, right, feel that all the time. To the mayor's point, the day in and day out, you've mentioned that a lot too, about that scarcity mindset, or what we call the survival mindset.
Or just lack of knowledge, because sometimes it's not even so much that the resources aren't there, it's just people don't even know.
And that's what we hear a lot with end users and community members, is that they just don't even know.
I would like to add lastly that all of the resources and services is really great on paper, but, because I've noticed that where backing is smaller and what we are providing is bigger, but that's not in reality, like that's not reality, because if someone is looking for housing, yeah, I can refer them to the housing authority, they're probably not gonna get, until a year later, or stuff like that. With the immigration, with asylum, all different organizations, nonprofit organizations were looked up that they, like a lot of people lost that opportunity to apply for asylum. So we show so many services, but we're.
Well, that's our point about scale, right? You can have a lot of service providers and it looks good, but they aren't scaled to the need. And they can only scale to the need if they're working together.
As you leave, make sure to get a report in the back, and then there's a correction page, one single sheet of paper that you should take with that. And that replaces, I think, page 19, is it?
Yeah, 19, they have Xed out. They go online to get the accurate version. One more comment, and we're going to close.
I personally am called to ask for assistance in certain things and get too much. And it's not, so what you could do is probably, sorry, you don't qualify, you make too much.
Yep.
And I remember reading.
But you have the need.
Yeah, and it's still there, and it's, so you do what you can do, but that need's still there.
Yeah, and we acknowledge that fully, and there's different ways of looking at their distress need for houses, I guess, households, is there is the severe, then you got the moderate, right? And then, like we said, they're still at risk and they're comfortable, but yet still not really comfortable, right? And everybody defines that for themselves when you have those basic needs. And there's different categories, like Alice is a category. We have really underemployed people versus unemployed people, right? And your community has a lot just in those two categories. So to your point, there are services for you, but you need to find the ones you qualify.
And right now, when we say you need to, that's difficult. So the pathway, and then again, what we're talking about with this collaborative, you should not get turned away. You should be directed in a direction that gets you served. And that's got to be the attitude. And I think most providers have that attitude, but if you don't fit what they're doing, then they can't. So we gotta have a better start place.
Yeah, so the perfect point as to why this is needed, with the scalability of volume in addition to qualifications that are the red tape, so to speak, for accessibility that people should be able to navigate and help you through. No question.
I'm going to use my grocery store metaphor one more time. You got to know which aisle to go down, and it's got to be labeled clearly, so you know.
Well, we want to thank you all very much for this, and please go to the website, collaboratewaukegan.com, and fill out the form for more ideas. Download the information. We're going to be back in a month, but we have a lot of work we're going to be doing until then, and we want all the information that you can provide for us. So if this is a good idea, let us know. If it's not a good idea, let us know. So that we can get the feedback together and think about things differently if we should be.
And follow the webpage. We may be putting a survey on there soon to offer some additional input. And as was mentioned earlier, word of mouth is a good thing, so please spread the word. And we'd love as much input on this as possible.
Will we get a follow-up for like the next event?
Yes.
If you signed in on the sign-in sheet, we'll make sure to contact you about the next one. Again, collaboratewaukegan.com. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate everybody.